What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Top Gun Maverick, and this review is going to be very easy to do because the movie fucking rocks. And I guess it's just a good week for film and television because we had the incredible mid-season 6 finale of Better Call Saul, and now we've got this good old-fashioned Hollywood blockbuster. And I don't mean old-fashioned in terms of its style, because it feels very, very current and feels very new, but old-fashioned in terms of good old-fashioned practical special effects, basically the best aerial photography you have ever seen, up on the screen with an actual movie star in the cockpit. And in an era of soundstage-bound kind of green screen digital effects where you can tell maybe even the actors aren't necessarily even shooting the scene at the same time. Like, you know, I love and adore Marvel for a lot of reasons. However, everything's shot on a soundstage and it all starts to kind of look the same. But with this, you're just going to be totally immersed in this exhilarating experience that is kind of what Hollywood is supposed to do. And the rumors are, or at least the projections are, that this is going to be the biggest box office opening weekend of Tom Cruise's career. In spite of being a movie star for 40 years at this point, I don't think he's ever had a movie open with like more than like 60 or 65 million domestic box office. And if Top Gun Maverick breaks the 100 mark, then well deserved, because the movie is just a fucking blast. And I'm not going to be going into spoilers in this particular review. Maybe I'll have a few details toward the end, but I'll give you fair warning. But you don't really need to go into spoilers to sing this movie's praises, because it's not about what happens, it's how they do it, how the ideas and the story beats are executed, how they're delivered. And Joseph Kosinski, I'm going to be looking at his career in a totally different light from now on, because he burst onto the screen or onto the scene with Tron Legacy, which earned him a lot of fans. And then Oblivion, I feel like perhaps was like a few steps back. And then when he did Only the Brave, I totally forgot this movie even existed until I looked up his IMDb profile for this review. So yeah, suffice to say, I did not see Only the Brave, but maybe I should. But after seeing Top Gun Maverick, there's no question in my mind, Joseph Kosinski is an A-list Hollywood director who deserves to be considered for the biggest projects out there, no matter what franchise they might be or original creations might be in his back pocket. I'll be rooting for him moving forward because, man, he seriously delivered. It's not often that I say a movie went above and beyond my expectations, and a couple years ago, my expectations were very low. One of the big reasons why my expectations were low back in the day was there was all this drama, like around 2019 or 20, about how on Tom Cruise's jacket, they were blurring out or changing the flags for Taiwan and for Japan because of Chinese investment in Paramount Pictures. And I was like, that's just gross. I mean, Top Gun, what's more patriotic than the original 1986 Top Gun movie, a movie which I saw at age 10 in the theater. And the idea that a Top Gun movie would play that game was just, I found to be a little gross. I don't often go into politics on this channel, but I will give you a little insight into my political thinking with my reaction. But the good news is they totally reversed the decision. The flags of both Japan and Taiwan are alive and well in this movie. And I don't know what China might have to say about that. But if you're going to make a movie about the Navy and about fighter pilots, then yeah, it probably helps to be true or loyal to our allies on the screen the same way we are in real life. So bravo for taking the stand. And it's interesting, Paramount is not the only studio to take a similar stand as of late. Sony took a big stand when China asked for the Statue of Liberty to be removed from the final scene of Spider-Man No Way Home. Sony refused. It's a very strange dynamic going on right now between China and Hollywood, where obviously Hollywood wants Chinese box office, but are less willing now to acquiesce to Chinese officials and their very strange requests. So, for all you patriots out there, not to worry, Top Gun Maverick, its heart's in the right place. But as I mentioned before, I was one of the original audience members of the original movie. I was at a place called Camp Seagull, summer 1986. It's a summer that I turned 10 years old. And we had one like day trip into like a town or a city. I can't remember what city it was, but we had two options. You could go deep sea fishing or you could go to the movies. So that was like the one movie we got to see all summer long. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to the movies. I'll never forget, I was sitting beside a buddy of mine. I was like, does anybody like hook up or get naked in this? I mean, you know, age 10. However I phrased the question, I'm sure it was very innocent. And I remember he said, well, when something's about to happen, I'll hold my finger up as a warning, because he'd already seen it prior to camp starting. And I'll never forget looking over at him during the big, very chaste sex scene in the original Top Gun. He was like holding his pinky up. And I can still see that moment in the theater like it happened yesterday, even though it happened, 36 years ago? But that original movie, it's hard to overstate what an impact it had on the culture. I mean, the soundtrack was just everywhere. I mean, Take My Breath Away and Danger Zone, or even just the opening kind of bells, like the themes. Top Gun, it just cut right through the culture. It turned Tony Scott into a giant director. It guaranteed that Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson were going to be the biggest producers of the era. And it solidified Tom Cruise as just an absolute giant. I mean, he was already well on his way. Movies like The Outsiders and obviously Risky Business had really put him on the fast track to being a massive movie star. But Top Gun really locked it in. And here we are, decades later. And it's incredible just how quickly and easily he was just able to re-inhabit the role of Maverick. And I think part of the success of this movie is that it found a nice balance between nostalgia and fan service for people who love the old movie, but at the same time, carrying the ball forward in a big way, because this is not Star Wars, this is not Star Trek. You can't completely dine out on nostalgia to the point where you don't even attempt anything else. This is a movie about the military, and you got to do something that's current and exciting and dynamic. And the premise is great. We see how he's still basically doing his best to set records as somebody who's part of a dying breed, as obviously as drones take over, living, breathing pilots are less and less necessary. But there's a mission coming up to take out this uranium enrichment plant where they're going to need 7 or 8 actual real deal pilots. And so they bring him in to train this next generation. And that's what's so much fun about this movie, is seeing how this movie hits a lot of the beats of the earlier movie, but now we're seeing it through the older and wiser eyes of Maverick. But when he needs to get to the cockpit and kick some ass, oh my God. I mean, a lot of this movie is going to feel kind of like an old-fashioned dad movie, but I don't care what age you are, whether you're 5 or 85, when these actors are in those jets flying around practicing their dogfights, you're going to get goosebumps all been on your arms. Your hair's going to stand straight out. I mean, those scenes are so hardcore and so badass, and the photography is just gorgeous. You're never confused about where people are or what's happening. They really found a way to kind of mount and stage the action in the most intense way humanly possible, and that only intensifies in the climax. And this is probably going to sound a little hyperbolic, but the final, basically 30, 40 minutes of action, I have a feeling people are going to be mentioning it in the same breath as the final attack on the Death Star in the 1977 Star Wars. And it's going to compare very favorably, where you have all these pilots going up against superior odds, superior technology, and just kicking all kinds of ass. And yeah, people are going to be very satisfied walking out of this movie. Suffice to say, I'm kind of amazed at how well they pulled off this movie at a time where I'm kind of gagging on and rejecting all attempts at resurrecting dying old franchises. I'm going to have to contradict myself. As much as I have kind of bashed the lack of new intellectual property in the multiplex as of late, this is proof that you can dust off a 36-year-old hit and make it live and breathe again. And I think a big part of why it works is the cast is just lethal. They got a great bench, a very deep bench of incredible acting talent. Let's start with Jennifer Connelly, a woman I've had a crush on probably since Labyrinth when I was a little kid. And she's 6 years my elder, so she's officially in her 50s. And even in her 50s, she is still just a stone-cold fox. And there are times, I'm going to get real cheesy here, but there are times where on the screen, she will take your breath away. Just like that cheesy fucking song from the original movie. She is just an angel in this. And because she and Tom Cruise both became stars in the 80s, it seems appropriate that they could still get it on and, make their pulses quicken in each other's company. But it was great seeing Val Kilmer back as the Iceman. And I went and saw this at an Alamo Drafthouse. And Alamo Drafthouse pretty much always gets an A+ in terms of presentation. But it was cool. They had a little kind of public service announcement before the movie performed by Val Kilmer, where, for people who don't know, he's had a lot of health issues with his throat as of late, and he basically wanted to demonstrate the need for silence and not texting during the movie. And he said, well, I'm just going to do that by sitting here like I normally do. And so anyway, it was just a cool little kind of personal moment with Val Kilmer before the movie started. But moving on, John Hamm, fucking awesome in this. John Hamm, he's like a young Ed Harris in this, and Ed Harris happens to be in it too. I mean, I've been watching Ed Harris in movies since I saw Creepshow as a little kid, and he's still got it, and he's still incredible in this. And here's a big surprise. If you listen to my podcast, Wrong Reel, over the years, you've probably heard me talk some smack from time to time about Miles Teller, and I promised not to talk any more smack after he teamed up with Nicholas Winding Refn for Too Old to Die Young, because that show was such a creative gamble for Miles Teller. I was like, you know what? If you're willing to make a show like this, I'm gonna stop talking smack on a personal level moving forward, and that will continue with this. While he's not my favorite performer in this, and some of my nagging criticisms of him from the past still linger, let's just say he does a damn good job as Goose's son, and you can almost feel kind of like a passing of the baton from the original Goose to him, and he does a good job. I won't say he knocks it out of the park, but he does a good job. But one of my favorite performers in this is a newcomer to the franchise, and he plays the character Hondo, and I'm going to butcher his name when I try to say it, but Bashir Salahuddin, I hope I'm vaguely kind of in the ballpark of how to say that correctly. He is awesome in this. Brings so much humor and heart. He has this incredible relationship with Tom Cruise in it. Love seeing him. And Charles Parnell, who plays a character named Warlock, I think. He's fucking awesome as well. So it's like, yeah, I love movies where you can have 9, 10, 11, 12 people. All of them have great dramatic beats. All of them have great lines, great moments. So from Payback to Hangman to Bob to Fanboy to Phoenix, there are a lot of different characters for audience members to fall in love with for different reasons, and they all get their moment to shine, whether that's in training or during the final mission or just getting wasted in the bar and raising hell. And it's incredible just how well the brand and the flavor of the Top Gun universe has aged after all this time. But as far as criticisms go, there's definitely some downtime. And you're like, this movie's maybe taking it too easy and just kind of taking its time, so on and so forth. But those scenes, they don't come often, and because you've got at least like 3 or 4 major action set pieces scattered throughout the movie, if at any time you find yourself bored, it will not last for long. And I'm taking a quick glance at my notes, and I threw down one random reference to the old NES game for Top Gun. For people who don't know, back in the late 80s, if you had the original Nintendo Entertainment System, there's a game that left just deep emotional scar tissue on an entire generation of kids, and that is Top Gun. It was the most fucked up game where the game was fun and you couldn't resist wanting to give it a try due to the name Top Gun, but it had this very strange mechanic where it would give you instructions anytime you were trying to land on an aircraft carrier, but either the instructions were wrong or there was like a lag, but they always sound like up, right, down, but you couldn't finish a mission unless you landed on the aircraft carrier. So I don't know if I ever even cleared the first board. I would always just explode. It's like, at a minimum, they should have just like removed like a life, but just let you continue since the mission was technically over. But anyway, if you ever want to give yourself or just put yourself through total hell, dust off the old Nintendo Entertainment System and take that Top Gun game for a test drive. So I guess in the final analysis, this movie proves that Hollywood can still deliver just that classic Hollywood formula done right, but for a brand new audience. Because for people who were born in the 21st century, I mean, I doubt many of them have even seen Top Gun. I bet a lot of them have never even fucking heard of Top Gun, and this will be their first exposure to that world. But it does sprinkle some little kind of nods to the past as well as flashbacks. So I don't think, like say you're 12 and you're just like, what is Top Gun Maverick? Who is Tom Cruise? I think you could go see this and still have a really good time. And then they might be like, hey, well, let's go back and watch the original one. Oh, well, who's this Tony Scott guy? And that might open the door to watching Tony Scott's kick-ass movies like True Romance or Man on Fire. I mean, Tony Scott was such a badass director, and he is sorely missed. But hopefully, wherever he is smiling with pride on this passing of the baton and keeping this world going. Because he seriously delivered on that first movie, but he had an amazing career with so many great movies like The Hunger and Tony Scott. Wherever you are missed. And it's funny, like just thinking back to that old movie. I have so many strange memories related to it. I'll never forget being in the theater. Like I said, I turned 10 that summer. I can't remember if I saw it right before I turned 10 or right after my July 6th birthday. But when that volleyball scene first came on, like 500 thunderous, just squeals just erupted from the audience. It's like, whoa, like where did all these girls come from? It reminded me of when I saw Dune in the theater, when Sting stepped out of like that steam bath wearing a silver mankini. And I guess in the 80s, girls were just really big into squealing in movies. I haven't heard people squeal in movies in a long time. But what I did hear multiple times today toward the end was applause. And it wasn't like one of those like moments where like somebody sees Matt Murdock walk into a room and like they stand up and like, ooh, like clap too aggressive just to like let everybody know that they recognize something. This was the applause of an audience that was just enjoying the ride. And as I got up and walked out, the applause was still going and people were sharing all these smiles and looks. Definitely was a good audience experience where everybody was just invested and having a good old time. So if you're on the fence about whether or not to throw down some cash and go see this in the theater, my recommendation is to find the largest screen you can, preferably at an Alamo Drafthouse since they throw people out for being on their phones. But go see it on the biggest screen you can and try to be center, because there's so many dynamic shots where you're seeing what the pilots are seeing, or it's the reverse and you're seeing the pilots come right at you. It's so balls to the wall. It's so fucking intense. Then watching them, I don't even know the terminology, watching them corkscrew and watching them do all their maneuvers, it puts you right there in the seat with them. And yeah, it's a pulse-pounding experience. I think people are going to totally enjoy it. Is it a perfect movie? No, but what the hell is even a perfect movie supposed to be? It's a wild, good time, and I wish it all the best and hope it makes piles of money. But one last thing before I go, I mentioned this a bit in my trailer reaction video to Mission Impossible 7 the other day, where I was just calling attention to all the giant directors that Tom Cruise has worked with over the years. Because, yeah, Tom Cruise, he's going to be 60 years old this summer. He's had an incredible career. But how many actors can you think of that are working today, that are still movie stars, that have been directed by Francis Ford Coppola, that have been directed by Ridley Scott, have been directed by Tony Scott, been directed by Martin Scorsese, have been directed by Oliver Stone and friggin' Stanley Kubrick. I mean, it's crazy. Paul Thomas Anderson, John Woo. He's worked with so many giants. Michael Mann. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's probably premature to bring up Joseph Kosinski in that same conversation, but if he keeps making good movies like this, it won't be long before people are talking about him as one of the best directors working today. But I think that's all I got to say, so hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out if you want to talk about Top Gun or Top Gun Maverick or Tom Cruise or whatever the case might be. But please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell. Hope everyone has a great weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.